We have a pretty significant situation unfolding with a tropical system organizing pretty quickly in the tropical Atlantic. In this video, we'll be tracking this tropical depression 2 as it's probably going to turn into Hurricane Beryl as it barrels towards the Windward Islands. But first, if you're new here, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for more tropical weather updates. So, right now, Tropical Depression 2. This is the first advisory they issued a couple hours ago, and it's 35 miles an hour moving west at 17 miles an hour. And we also have two other systems, Invest 94 over the kind of western Caribbean going into the southern Gulf of Mexico, the Bay of Campeche. This one, Tropical Depression 2 is going to become probably Tropical Storm Beryl and actually Hurricane Beryl in pretty soon. This one could become a named storm that, if this forms right after Beryl, that would be Chris. Then we actually have another disturbance with a 30% chance of formation behind this Tropical Depression 2. That could be another significant system, but especially Tropical Depression 2 is the big deal because this could rapidly intensify and it's going to hit the Windward Islands. Pretty much that's what it looks like. Here's kind of the overview of the Atlantic, and you have, Tropical Depression 2 looks pretty organized, and then you have this other disturbance behind it, and you have Invest 94 over there, going into the Bay of Campeche. It could form into something weak, similar to Alberto, in the same place, potentially, but Tropical Depression 2 is the big deal. This is going straight for the Windward Islands, and then, just wait till you see some of the hurricane models. It looks really bad. And then we have this third one that could also become a strong tropical storm behind it, potentially, but it looks like it might get more unfavorable conditions over time. This is the satellite view of Tropical Depression 2. Yeah, it definitely looks pretty organized, and this is going towards sea surface temperatures of up to like about 28, 29 degrees Celsius in the mid 80s. So definitely some really favorable sea surface temperatures when it gets towards the Windward Islands and then gets into the Caribbean. Pretty favorable in terms of those sea surface temperatures. The shear looks like it might be, the shear is light over the storm right now, but ahead of it looks like there's a lot of shear. But some of this is going away from the storm. It can actually just become part of the outflow of the storm. And then the dry air is to the north of the storm. So it seems like it's trying to miss some of the worst, dry air and the Saharan dust and all of that. So we'll see what happens with that. Now, this is the key messages. They're saying it's expected to become a hurricane when it hits the Windward Islands late Sunday night or Monday, and there's a risk of heavy rain, hurricane-force winds, and dangerous storm surge and waves. And they're also thinking that hurricane and tropical storm watches will be needed for portions of the Windward and southern Leeward Islands later tonight or early Saturday. And also interests in the central and western Caribbean should monitor the progress of the system because this could also hit Jamaica potentially. As a hurricane, there's some of the models are showing it's going to stay intense as it goes through the Caribbean. Other models are kind of saying it's going to weaken, possibly, get into some more unfavorable conditions in the Caribbean. We'll have to see because it could change because, this has actually uptrended pretty quickly from just a few days ago. Really, since Wednesday, the models have really been showing this storm organizing and strengthening very quickly and becoming something pretty concerning. And so these are the models showing basically in 24 hours where it's going to be 48 hours. So this is 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. This is going to be on pretty much Sunday night, early Monday kind of time frame, hitting the Windward Islands. And this is actually pretty far south. This is either going to make landfall in Barbados or move very close to Barbados, and also St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, some of those islands in the Windward Islands, really directly going to get impacted with this. The Leeward Islands, not so much. The Lesser Antilles, of course, have to be paying attention to this system, but, really the Windward Islands are directly going to get the most intense conditions from this. Now, and that's pretty confident with the track forecast is, pretty certain on that. And then it does get a little more uncertain when it goes in the Caribbean. It could try to move towards Central America, or if it stays a more intense system, this could pull further north. Some of the ensembles before were showing it going way out to sea. That doesn't really look likely. It does look more likely that it's gonna, if it could try to go more towards Haiti, Jamaica, Cuba, that kind of area, even the Dominican Republic. But there are some models kind of pushing it pretty far north over even Puerto Rico and going towards the southeastern Bahamas. But most of the models are really showing this area getting hit by the storm after the middle of next week. But really the Windward Islands, if you're in the Windward Islands, you should really be paying attention to the system and prepare for very significant impacts, because this storm could rapidly intensify. It's showing pretty much at the next advisory, this is going to be a tropical storm. And then it could become a hurricane within 36 to 48 hours, apparently. And then, so it's going to probably hit the Windward Islands as a hurricane. And then it could even become a major hurricane after that. Like, some of the models are showing it really rapidly intensifying and hitting the Windward Islands as a Category 3 hurricane, potentially. I think that's probably not going to happen, but it could. This is actually pretty rare to have a hurricane forming this early in the hurricane season. This would make it the second earliest hurricane to form, and pretty far east too, but, and very early in the season. It could be the second earliest one behind the 1933 Trinidad hurricane. So this would be ahead of Hurricane Elsa back in 2021 and Hurricane Beryl in 2018, which actually, would have the same name going in a similar place. But Beryl, actually, they did think it was going to intensify at one point into a Category 2 hurricane, but then it actually did get destroyed before it reached the islands. So, that could happen here, but it does look, like it's pretty favorable and unusually favorable for this to rapidly intensify, at least into a hurricane, maybe Cat 2. This, these models are really showing a Cat 2, Cat 3, maybe a Cat 4 at the most, but then it does look like it could end up either hitting some of the bigger islands like, Jamaica, Cuba, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and it could weaken, or it could, could level off, but, it could reach some more unfavorable conditions after about, 4 to 5 days. That is a lot more uncertain, as the models are pretty spread out with that. And so there's that. And then Invest 94, this could be another named storm, but this one looks a lot weaker. It's going to go over the Yucatan, and then they're thinking maybe it could develop into something, and then it'll hit the coast of eastern Mexico, go, over Mexico, get destroyed, and then go into the Pacific, potentially. And then, they're showing maybe a tropical storm over the next 72 hours, possibly. It could intensify into a tropical storm. But then, this one isn't necessarily going to be that significant. Really, Tropical Depression 2, or potentially Hurricane Beryl, is what is, more significant looking. This is the Dvorak technique, still showing about 32 knots, so not a tropical storm just yet, but I think tonight it probably will become a tropical storm. This is the Euro ensemble, and if you look at this, what this is showing basically in, basically 72 hours now it's going to be less than 72 hours, but early Monday or late Sunday night, it's going to reach the Windward Islands, and this is, pretty much all the models are showing it's going to be somewhere between here and here. That's pretty much what they're showing. So that's pretty certain there. Now, the main Euro is taking this south of Jamaica and pushing it more into the Yucatan. That's possible, but you notice some of the stronger members are showing if this system actually intensifies more, it's going to get pulled to the north. Like, and that's usually what happens with the stronger systems, so it could get pulled to the north and end up hitting Puerto Rico, hitting the Dominican Republic. That'll be pretty bad if that happens. That's like Dorian, how it did pull to the north and then it really rapidly intensified, but this is showing it possibly being a major hurricane and then going towards Puerto Rico. That's really bad. So if, anybody in the Caribbean should be paying attention to this storm. This is not necessarily going to happen, but, because the track is uncertain more than about 3 to 4 days out. So this could go towards Central America. This could go, somewhere into the Caribbean. There's some uncertainty with that, but definitely the Windward Islands going to get hit pretty hard with this. And then even, just only out to 120 hours, you still see there's a decent amount of spread between the Euro ensembles. And then the GEFS is a little weaker with this storm for some reason, showing it, it actually intensifies to maybe a hurricane that's, 70, 80 knots, but then it weakens down further west in the Caribbean and kind of keeps going westward. We'll see if that happens, but, this is just the regular GFS. It shows this becoming 9 to 70 millibars by the time it hits, basically by the time it hits the Windward Islands this is showing it pretty much what would be 8 a.m. in kind of Eastern time on July 1st. So that's early on Monday, July 1st, and then this keeps going. It actually intensifies quite a bit, but then it does get destroyed over Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and sort of Jamaica and Cuba by July 3rd. So then it goes away before July 4th, it looks like. But then you do have this other system behind it that intensifies quite a bit, and then it smashes into the Dominican Republic. That's that other disturbance that we saw that could happen, and then those systems kind of disappear by, July 8th, 9th, and 10th. The thing is that the shear, usually conditions right now are unfavorable in the main development region. So to have the main development region heating up like this, this early in the season, that's concerning. And usually there's going to be a lot of shear, but it looks like with this that you kind of have the shear pushing out away from the storm, this kind of more anticyclonic pattern, and the shear on top of the system is actually pretty weak. And but then it does look like some of the shear does start to destroy the system, and this other one behind it too, not so favorable, and then it really gets shredded by the shear by July 4th. But the GFS does show that pretty much, the shear is going to be below average in this area where the storm is, at least for the first few days. Shear is pretty far below average, even in this whole area. So that's going to make things more favorable for this system. But there's more shear as it goes further north. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. And the dry air could also be a problem, but, because that was a problem with Beryl last time in 2018. you know, it ran into some more shear and dry air that really just wiped it out. So we'll have to see what happens. But a lot of these models are very, very aggressive, showing possibly a major hurricane hitting the Windward Islands by Monday. That's going to be really bad if that happens. Now, you see, there's a lot of dry air, but it seems like this storm doesn't really get destroyed by that dry air. The second one seems like it might, to some extent, and the shear, so we'll see. But it seems like this, basically Tropical Depression 2 or Hurricane Beryl, seems to not get destroyed too much by the shear. And then if you actually look at the upper level winds, you kind of get this anticyclone over it, but then as the storm weakens, the anticyclone is kind of off, not on top of the storm. And so that's we'll have to see what happens there. But yeah, the Euro model is actually showing a weaker system and actually more dry air causing problems for this storm, and it shows a lot weaker of a system that goes further west, and then it shows that other system even weaker than Beryl going further west as well, and it actually shows Beryl could go all the way towards Mexico. So if it stays weaker, it just keeps going west. And then the CMC model is also showing pretty much a weaker system going and actually hitting Jamaica, and then a system behind it that goes into Central America. Now, the HWRF, some of the hurricane models are really aggressive, showing this storm rapidly intensifying into a huge hurricane. The satellite imagery really shows this explodes. By 5 days, this is coming towards Jamaica. It's a major hurricane, obviously. On the satellite imagery, it rapidly intensifies, even starts getting close to having an eye when it reaches Barbados. And then it really just, after it passes those islands, goes into the Caribbean, it blows up, and it could become a huge, major hurricane, kind of misses Haiti just by a little bit, but going towards Jamaica, according to the HWRF. And then, in terms of the actual winds, it's showing really it doesn't reach hurricane intensity until pretty much tomorrow night, which is actually pretty quick. And then it's showing probably 85 miles an hour as it's coming in towards Barbados, and then it keeps going and it intensifies even more into a major hurricane, possibly 140 miles an hour, and it gets pretty intense. Even 123 knots, I think that's close to like 145 miles an hour. This is going down all the way to 941 millibars, 939 millibars, 125 knots. That's, an intense storm. And then it keeps going, and then it's coming really close to Jamaica as a major hurricane. That's the HWRF, which sometimes, I think that this might be a little extreme, but definitely at least a hurricane going through the Windward Islands and also potentially other places in the Caribbean. The HAFS A model is actually showing, pretty much a similar thing. This really intensifies and actually goes south. This could actually go south of Barbados and kind of miss Barbados, but some of these, somewhere in the Windward Islands could definitely see a landfall. And even if there's not a direct landfall, definitely hurricane force winds, and really heavy rain, flooding, storm surge, all of that. It's definitely pretty significant and impacts. And even it could approach major hurricane intensity, apparently, when it gets towards these islands. So, very, very intense. And then this actually shows it actually hits Haiti a little bit, and then goes past there, possibly reaching Cuba or Jamaica by July 3rd. It weakens slightly, but still pretty intense. And this is actually Invest 94. The halves A, the H dwarf is like showing this Invest 94 becoming a hurricane. That's why I'm like, so this is a the H dwarf is probably way too extreme, but we'll see. The halves A is showing possibly a strong tropical storm going towards Mexico with Invest 94. That's also questionable. That's probably not going to happen. I think a weak tropical storm, but Tropical Depression 2 definitely does look like it will be a hurricane. We'll see about a major hurricane. And this is the halves A. It's showing that shear pattern is definitely an anticyclone over the storm as it's rapidly intensifying. But then notice it does kind of look like the pattern is getting less favorable. It's showing more shear kind of going over the storm. So it could start destroying the system once if it pulls too far north. It could actually, some of that shear is going to really get to the storm. And these are the Euro ensemble tracks showing, this is Invest 94. This is, could possibly form into something weak. But then you have, this is Tropical Depression 2, definitely steadily strengthening as it gets towards over the Windward Islands. And then you have that third disturbance behind it, a lot weaker, but still could do something. But then notice how the ensembles really spread out. Some are going towards Central America, others are going towards Puerto Rico, maybe even north of there. So the kind of Leeward Islands could still get impacted, just not a direct hit probably, but we'll see how this intensifies, how if it pulls north, what happens over the next few days. But pretty much up to here is pretty confident on it hitting the Windward Islands. After this, there's some uncertainty of whether it's going to go kind of here or here, and so we'll see what happens there. And then this other storm is weaker, and the tracks, notice that it starts to overlap, but still really uncertain with the third system what happens with that. But we have this significant activity even under, interestingly enough, it's under a sinking phase of the MJO and everything. It's supposed to be unfavorable for tropical storms, but instead it actually looks like it is pretty favorable, and so that's kind of odd. It's showing June 27th unfavorable, July 2nd unfavorable, even though it's not that bad over the Atlantic. It's actually slightly favorable over the eastern part of the Atlantic, so that might have something to do with it. But it does look like it starts to get more favorable through July, so we'll have to see if more activity shows up. It's starting to look a bit more favorable, in mid-July, even late July, going into August, where it starts, looking at the beginning of August, very favorable across the East Pacific too, which has been inactive. Possibly I think we're having we haven't had anything, so anything that does form will be the record latest, start to an East Pacific hurricane season, while we're having, possibly one of the earliest hurricanes in the Atlantic, and then even going into August, possibly favorable, so that's pretty interesting. And right now, this is kind of the tropical, intensity index, where it's actually highly favorable across a lot of the, different parts in the Atlantic, in the Caribbean, so that's interesting that, even under supposedly unfavorable conditions, we're still having, a lot of tropical activity. And so this is, the hurricane season is definitely ramping up. And even the shear, according to the GEFS, the shear is definitely below average in the Caribbean, and there's definitely a chart showing that it is, like, down to possibly, 12 to 15 knots, which is, we're down to what the shear level could be in September. So, it's definitely unusually conducive. They said unusually favorable for development, and, the GEFS is trying to say there's going to be a little more shear that does show up kind of in mid-July in the Caribbean, but then it really, starts dropping down again. But of course, the Eastern Pacific, it really is looking unfavorable for pretty much, this is going to be a really inactive season in the Eastern Pacific, possibly one of the least active seasons, possibly ever recorded. Now, the MJO kind of CHI kind of forecast, it is showing, notice kind of sort of halfway favorable over the part of the eastern part of the Atlantic, but then it tries to make it really unfavorable. But then notice it kind of starts getting favorable towards the end of July. It starts they're starting to hint at, mid to late July, it starts to get at least neutral to even slightly favorable over the western part of the Atlantic. The hurricane season is ramping up, and this is only July. We're going, still at the beginning of the hurricane season. We still have, August and September and October are the peak months of the hurricane season. Thanks for watching this video. Please be sure to like the video, share the video, and hit the subscribe button for more tropical weather updates. Extreme Weather Zone